Imagine a shop where every repair isn't about fixing cars, but about perfecting the craft, mastering the trade, and building a legacy. That's exactly what my guest today, David Rodrigues, has been doing for nearly 2 decades. He's been turning wrenches on Hondas and Acuras almost completely for that entire time, working on multiple skills, honing them out, learning leadership, learning wrenching, learning problem solving. David just isn't a technician. He's a problem solver, a precision-driven craftsman, a mentor to the next generation coming up in the trade. Today we dive into this fellow Canadian's journey, which will be very interesting because there's some things that are very similar, but slightly shifted that we get to talk about today. And what's he learned along the way? There's a lot of interesting things about Honda and Acura that I don't know about that I'm hoping that I get to learn today, and I hope you get to learn as well. Today, we dive into this Canadian's journey. This is David's story on the Wrench Turners podcast. David, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Joshua. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
What's cool, we were just talking about this before we hit the record button, is that we went to the same college to do our technical training right off the rip. So here in Canada, for those who haven't watched some of the earlier episodes where I kind of spent a lot of time talking about this quite frequently, and I haven't in a bit, there's only like 3 colleges in all of Ontario that teaches the basic mechanic training that we are required and regulated to take here in Ontario and pretty much across Canada. And David went to the same school, the same campus, and had the same teachers for the most part. We're gonna discuss that here in a minute, that I did only like 3 years after. So it's interesting because not a lot of people I've come across are even remotely close to that. David, so before we get into college, and training, what got you into the trade?
So I don't have one of those cool stories where, like, my dad wasn't a mechanic or an uncle or anything like that. I basically just fell in love with cars at a young age. So I'm the youngest of 3 boys, and my oldest brother is 12 years older than I am. So when I was, 4, 5, 6, he was getting into his first cars, and he was always into modifying them and that kind of stuff. So that kind of ingrained the love of cars in me. Kind of seeing your older brother do it, you kind of want to, you look up to them, you want to grow up to be like them. So yeah, it was always, Hot Wheels, RC cars, watching my brother do cool stuff to his car. So that's kind of what made me fall in love with cars. And then I don't really know what it is, but at a young age, like, even I remember elementary school, like grade 7 and 8, like I already knew, like, I want to be a mechanic, I want to work on these things. And yeah, it kind of just snowballed from there.
Interesting. Were you the kid? So there's a couple descriptions that have come up over the years now. I can't believe 160 episodes. We're knocking on the door at 200 episodes here,
Wow.
folks. So it's interesting to see how the stories change and evolve, but don't really change or evolve to some
Yeah.
description. So I can't remember who it was. I wish I could remember who it was now. Were you the person who took apart the stuff and never put it back together? Or were you the person who fastidiously took things apart, put them back together just to see how they work?
Combination of both, really. I do remember, like, I would take those, like, Hot Wheels and model cars and RCs, and I would try to, like, I'd take 2 or 3 of them apart, and I would try to kind of piece them together to modify them and stuff like that. And then there was other things where it's like, yeah, I took it apart, and then I realized I was way in over my head, and it was just kind of went in the box and off to the side.
Well, there are some of those things that we took apart that never wanted to be taken apart. And then
Yeah.
once you took it apart, you realized that they didn't really want to be taken apart, which means they really didn't go back together.
Yeah.
I remember my first fast tracks. Do you remember that? Way back in the day, fast tracks.
Yeah.
So I think it was the first time that someone had ever put rubber tracks on an RC car. It was designed like a tank, but it was just like an RC car with tracks on it, and it was really fast. Like, okay, I
Yeah.
want to see how does this come apart? How does this come apart so that I can understand how it works and how it goes so fast? Well, I took it apart, and I probably took it apart a little bit too forcefully.
Yeah.
And I remember, now that I know what it is, the rear differential that put the rear wheels together, the housing was solid plastic. I had to pry with little screwdriver to try and come it apart, and it popped apart. Okay, awesome. Then I realized I broke the tabs that hold it together.
Yeah.
And what you realize very early on when you do those things is the grease they use on those very little plastic gears
Here.
penetrates the plastic in the housing, so it doesn't matter how much super glue you use, it does not stick at all. So you fell in love with cars very early on, taking them apart. So what was the journey like inside your house, your home, your family home, going from I want to be a mechanic at an early age to try and figure out how to become a mechanic?
So my parents were really supportive, like, again, being the youngest of three boys, they never really told any of us, like, you have to do this or you have to go to college, or like, I'd still ended up going to college, but in a different way than my brothers did. But yeah, they were super supportive. I think they were kind of happy that they noticed that I kind of knew the path I wanted to take pretty early on, so that way I kind of wasn't mucking about, wasting time, kind of, oh, I'm gonna apply to a college and not really know what I want to take and kind of waste a year or do that kind of stuff. So they were super supportive. So I basically kind of laid out my path pretty much as soon as I started high school.
Okay. Interesting. I don't think I've had the story thus far where someone knew they wanted to be a mechanic, had a supportive family, and helped them navigate getting through what that first part of the journey is. Some of it, sorry, I take that back. Many of the stories that I've had through coaching and personal experiences over the years is that there hasn't been support. You shouldn't do that. You're never going to make any money. It's not a career. You end up hurting yourself. That the support, what was that support like? Because my entire family is like, I don't care what you do. You can be a garbage man. You can go to college. You can go to university. You can do all these things. Just go do something. It's okay. When it came time to become a mechanic, it was like, is that what you want to do? So, and
Uh,
it's interesting because the way my family, like my history, my
yeah,
grandfather closed down the dealership that had been running for 2 generations. Like, do you expect that mechanic in my blood to just not happen?
yeah. Well, so like I'm the son of two immigrants, and so like my father worked construction his whole life that he was here. My mother was a factory worker, so I think they were just kind of stoked that like I kind of knew what I wanted to do, and in that aspect. But kind of on the topic of people kind of turning their nose, I specifically remember my grade 8 elementary school teacher kind of prepping us to transition into high school. And he was going around the classroom, kind of, what do you think you want to be when you grow up and all that. And, there's the typical answers of a doctor, a lawyer, and that kind of thing. And he got to me and I told him, like, I want to be a mechanic. And I specifically remember his reaction being kind of like, "Oh, really?" And I don't know, that just kind of didn't sit well with me. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of showed him, I guess, because I think it turned out all right.
You know what? What was the phrase that I heard recently? Haters provide the fuel for success.
Yeah,
If you don't have any, you're not pushing hard enough. And to have that early on means you've had fuel to the fire to get moving, to move on, to learn all the things that you need to learn. So to that point, you got through high school. I'm assuming in high school, because we had co-op programs back then that were good programs back then. Did you get a co-op placement at a dealership or an independent shop or something like that to do?
yeah. So again, since I kind of knew the path I wanted to take pretty early on, I took co-op in grade 11 and grade 12, but I also did the Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I was in the auto shop class for 3 periods of the day for a whole semester. So almost one whole semester of grade 11 and grade 12, I was in the auto shop for the morning, and then I would leave school to go to my co-op placement for the afternoon. I was fortunate enough that I did a little bit of both. So my first co-op placement I did at an independent shop, which was a very small shop. It was just the owner and his nephew. It was just a two-bay shop, small, kind of local. And that was great because it kind of opened me up to working on everything, which as my career progressed kind of diminished. But it was cool because there we did literally everything. And the nephew was big into import drag racing at the time, which I loved because as I got into my teens, I, became a Honda boy and loved seeing all the souped up Civics and all that. So it was really cool to see all of his friends come in with, their Turbo B series and all these cars. And so we were doing a little bit of everything from, just your regular maintenance to putting coilovers on, his friend's Civic and that kind of stuff. So it was cool to kind of get that experience. And then in my final year of high school in grade 12, I actually got the co-op placement at the dealership that I'm still at.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that kind of worked out. It's funny too because when I went in for my co-op interview, the fixed ops manager at the time was really straightforward, and he was like, we want to help you out. We're giving you a co-op placement, but it's just a co-op placement. When you're done your co-op placement, shake hands. Thanks for your help. See you later. And I said, I didn't argue with him. I said, perfect. That's all I need. I need the experience. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. Towards the end of the placement, he approached me and he asked, he was like, would you be interested in a summer position? He's like, summertime, a lot of the techs take time off and,
Uh-huh.
just help around the shop, kind of clean up, do the typical stuff you've been doing at the co-op placement, but just for the summer. Come September, you're gone. I said, perfect, thank you. Like, I just need the experience for my resume. Anything helps. So grateful for the opportunity. And then just, September came and went, and I didn't say anything. I just kind of kept working away.
Uh-huh.
And it was shortly after that he approached me again. And as soon as he approached me, I thought, okay, here we go. And it was basically just, we like what you're doing. You seem to work hard and kind of have an understanding of what you want to do. Would you be interested in an apprenticeship? And of course, I jumped at the opportunity, and kind of the rest is
Yes, please.
history. Yeah, that's usually the hardest part, is getting signed on. You see it all the time on Indeed and stuff like that. People looking for first or second year apprentices, but
Uh-huh.
nobody really wants to take the jump to be the one to actually sign them on and kind of get the whole process started.
I understand a couple of things. I was in that position where, I'm very grateful for my grandfather. I'm very, very grateful for his best friend who owned the Chrysler store that I started at. And that was the reason why I got in the door. But it was a year before I got the service manager and the DP to sign off on me becoming an apprentice there. Like, it was a lot of push. It was monthly, then it was weekly, then it was like, okay, when can I get signed on so we can start accruing hours and da 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 da, and how do I get to school and da 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 da, and it was a push. Like, it was a hard push to get that done. And then it was, okay, when do I get to school? Like, it was a push to try and get anything done. And this is 2002, 2003, 2004, and it was just a struggle to get anything done. Now, a lot of things changed in 20 plus years,
Yeah.
but yeah, I didn't have that kind of experience. Now, maybe I did not show the kind of effort that you were putting forth. Maybe I didn't show the kind of aptitude that you did. I know myself, looking back on my career, I did some pretty cool stuff, right? I top 20 in top 20 master tech in Canada for CDJR at one point, but I still wouldn't put myself as a top tier tech. Like, I would give myself a career average of B. I
Yeah.
would be a career average of B. But for you to go in and put in the effort, be grateful for the opportunity, continue to put in the effort, be grateful for the opportunity, that becomes known. And that kind of showcases your first year. It was putting in the work, being humble, and being grateful for the opportunity. I realize there's a bit of a shortage to a certain degree right now, whether it's our country here in Canada or in the US or any country for that matter, because I think it's pretty much a global issue. But to go in, put in the work, be grateful, and be humble for the opportunity, I think that's the thing that we need to make sure that we're teaching, right? It's not being taught in elementary or high school. It's not being taught in our colleges. The basic emotional mentality is like, hey, every opportunity you should be grateful for. It's not like, hey, get on your knees to be thankful kind of stuff, but be thankful for the opportunity, because some people don't get those opportunities. And once you're in it, you should be grateful for it. Now, there is a level of expectation. Hey, I put in a hard day's work every single day. I show up every single day. I put in the extra training hours and da 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 da. There's a certain expectation of reciprocity, but still be grateful for the opportunity. So I appreciate that. So it sounds like we've heard your first year, because you spent grade 11, grade 12, got right out of high school basically, and you haven't left that store. What has
There's an
transpired?
asterisk to that, but
There's
we'll
okay.
get there.
Let's hear about the asterisk, because the asterisks usually tell a story.
So yeah, I graduated high school in 2006. Pretty much the day I wrote my last exam, I left high school, went straight to the dealership, and started working in the shop. Worked there for many, many years. And then it was in, I want to say November of 2015, I did get poached by a local Honda dealer. That the manager there reached out, asked if I was interested in coming on board there. I wasn't really actively looking to leave, But people start filling your ear with, come here and you'll make
So much more money.
150 hours every pay period guaranteed. My guys are making crazy money. And so I was tempted, at that point in my life. I had just gotten married, was in my house and all that. And so obviously more money is nice.
Mm-hmm.
So I took the opportunity. I went over to the local Honda dealer. As soon as I walked into that dealership, I was the highest trained out of all the techs in there, like local, like brand training and all that. And very quickly, I realized that I hate saying this because it makes me sound like I'm, big headed and all that. But I literally walked into that shop as the best tech in that shop. Very quickly did the writers realize that. So any problem car, warranty diag, all that was coming my way. I didn't mind at first because I do love that type of work. It's very rewarding to get, the problem car that people can't figure out. I take the time to, diagnose it, figure it out. Awesome. It sucks sometimes when it's under warranty and your admin team doesn't kind of go to bat for you and you're losing out on hours that you've spent diagnosing that you're not getting paid for because they only want to pay you to replace the faulty part that the flat rate time says, and they don't want to fight warranty to say, oh, you spent 2 or 3 hours diagnosing it, but no, you're only going to get the 1 hour to replace the faulty component. So this went back and forth for a little bit. Went up to the managers there and I told them, I said, hey, listen, I have no problem being this guy. I'll gladly do all the hard work, but I'd like to get compensated for it. And right away he was, oh, but if I give you more money, I have to give everybody more money. I said, well, not really. Like, that's not how that works. Like, I can do what they can do, but they can't really do what I can do. So we kind of went back and forth, and I wasn't too happy there. And then it just so happened that the dealership that I'm currently at reached out again, and they were, they asked, like, are you happy there? Would you be interested in coming back? And yeah, so I sat down with the manager there over a couple of pints and kind of had an informal kind of discussion about it. And, we sat down, talked some numbers, and I ended up going back to the Acura dealership that I'm at now. And this was in March of 2017. So I was gone for about like 16 months, I think it was. But yeah, and then I've been there ever since.
So this is a story that I've heard, not necessarily publicly in this way and record, because I want y'all to hear this. So you have an individual. David is obviously hardworking. Obviously, David is obviously ambitious because he has taken all of the factory training, trying to get as much training as humanly possible, get himself to a position where he can fix the stuff that nobody else can fix. We've had this discussion before. Brooklyn and Willie Carter brought this up in spades when I spoke with them. Fix the things, learn how to fix the things that nobody else can fix. Fix all the hard stuff. And you get really good at fixing the hard stuff. Because eventually, in time, you can start making some money. The caveat to both of those stories for Brooklyn, for Willie, and for David, there's a subtle difference between the three. It appears that David hasn't had the kind of leadership needed to facilitate winning when you fix the hard stuff. Some things, yes, there are some things that the warranty admin, service manager, and leadership just can't do. However, it's the stuff that they can do in the store to support the teams, the individuals who are putting in the hard work. That's what separates someone who is a service manager to someone who is a high-value leader. There's a subtle difference there, and it's the day-to-day stuff. If you win by fixing the hard stuff, but you lose on your paycheck because you are fixing the hard stuff, something has to change so that those individuals can still win. Either pay them more, because that's the easiest answer ever. Just pay them more per hour, or give them a bonus like, hey, you did nothing but high-level diagnostics for 50 hours in the last 2 weeks. Let's figure out a diagnostic pay. So when you are doing only diagnostic work, this is how much you make. When you're doing the gravy work, this is how much you make. That way, we're not paying you more to pay everybody and having to pay everybody else more. You're getting paid more for the extra high level stuff. Or you can do things like, hey, you just did 30 straight hours of diagnostics. Here is 10 PDIs and 10 maintenance jobs to do over the next 2 days. If you can crush them out, you're going to make a crap ton of money, but it's up to you to put in the effort to get all that gravy work done. I need the help to getting the PDIs and the recons and the maintenance done. You need the help to get your pay bump back up after doing the hard work. There is subtle ways. There's all kinds of other ways you can skin that cat. But the point is the support of the leadership team to help these folks, David and Willie and Brooklyn and every other technician I've had on the show that's had the same or similar concerns where I want to do the hard stuff. Russell Wickham is the biggest shining example of that.
Yeah.
Does all the really, really insanely hard stuff, but isn't making the money that makes it worth it. And the poor guy, along with many others out there that I've heard stories from, they're not getting the support they need from their leadership. Now, is there personalities? Is there characters? Is there communication things for all of you that may determine some subtle things? Absolutely. Variables matter. Context matter. Words matter. But at the end of the day, we as leaders in our industry, it's up to us to make sure our teams are supported. So please listen to David's story. Please understand how important David's story is, because there are thousands and thousands more just like it. To that
Also,
point.
yeah, to be fair, the dealership that I'm at before was pretty good. It almost took me leaving to get, you don't really know what you have till it's gone. So once I came back, it kind of really woke me up to the fact that like we do have the team that goes to bat for you. If you spend the hours, ripping a whole car apart to do all of this diag, our admin team now will fight for you. Our fixed ops manager, he's great that way. He'll pay you the time if you've taken it, as long as you do your due diligence, write your story, be super thorough in that aspect. They take care of us. So it took me. That's why I don't regret leaving and then coming back, because I feel it helped me grow quite a bit as a technician. And even though it was a short period of time, just over a year, the growth that I got from that was huge, because it gave me a very small taste of leadership in the shop. Because a lot of the guys were coming up to me asking me, I'm kind of stuck with this car. Can you give me a hand? Sure, no problem. So yeah, I don't regret leaving and then coming back, because I believe it made me a better tech, a better person, a better, baymate.
I appreciate that, because that's learning those tidbits. I am the mother of all no context. I have been with my wife since 17. We've been together for 24 years. I have zero context of what's out there. Now I would get shot if I try and find let's go sample for 12 months to see. No, I would get, no, let's not. Well, we won't go there anymore. But functionally speaking, that's what you've done to a certain capacity. And it's very difficult for a lot of folks to figure out how to communicate that, right? There are leaders out there that are really awesome, but you have, say you have apprentices and you have technicians who are 5 years or less in the trade and they've never worked for anyone else. They don't really know what's out there, because you can get all kind, like you were poached. It's like, hey, they're making so many hours and they're doing all of this and they're all, it's like, it sounds really great, especially think back to yourself, like an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, just like, I'm going to make all this money. I'm going to do all this crazy stuff. I'm going to do all this stuff. It's just like, oh my God, it's like a kid in a candy store, right? And you get in there and it's like, what's this? Like, what did I had it great over there. Like, why did I leave? This was awesome in comparison. Now, that's an opportunity for personal growth, right? Understanding what you had and what you now have to deal with. And it's subtly changing for, I get to go into work, to I have to go into work.
Yeah.
And when you start to have that mentality, it's like, okay, what changed? Okay, what did I have? What did I get to have? Those at that last shop, or those last shops, plural. What am I looking for? And this is why things like, sorry, let me back up before I squirrel too much here. You said something really important. And the important bit is the team goes to bat for you. The leadership goes to bat for you at the store. That's awesome. But you pointed out something really important there. If you've done your due diligence and your communication on the work order. I don't know how to make sure that I put a pin in that and drive it home to all of you that aren't doing this. You might be able to turn 12, 16 hours, but if you haven't documented, it means nothing.
Yeah, stories and notes are super important. because especially if you have to go back to something that either somebody else did, or even if you did it, a year or two ago, and you're dealing with something that may be related, but you're not sure, it is so much easier to be able to pull up that old RO, whether it's, a piece of paper or electronically, and be able to read the notes, and it's thorough and it makes sense, and it's not just, oh, check this, no, bad. It's like, well, that doesn't tell me anything. Replaced as diagnosed. Okay, that doesn't, yeah,
Replaced as diagnosed. I've seen that more times than I can count. And warranty administrators and ruthless RO writing people like myself, that doesn't fly.
yeah,
But I've seen it time and time again where the work order writing is just not up to par. That's why software companies like Pencil Wrench exist, to try and make that writing so much easier. That's why platforms like My Karma exist, to try and make the inspection process easier and more transparent for the technician and the customer, right? These are the subtle things that the industry has created, or has spawned, as it were, to make our lives easier. If you're not great at writing stories, you need to get better in some capacity. Either you need to get better at physically writing, or you need to find tools, software, hardware, processes to make your life easier so you get good stories. So to that end, you've been at functionally 2 stores in a long period of time. I think if I do the math right, it's about almost 17 years, give or take. What is perhaps one of the hardest, most challenging diagnostic work orders that you've ever faced?
oh geez, the one that just popped into my head right away when you said that was I had it was probably like an 18, 19, 20 TLX. That the issue, it would just be, customer said it would just light up like a Christmas tree, the car would stall out, and then he wouldn't be able to start it for extended period of time. But it would only happen either, after a car wash, or sat out in the rain for a while. But it took us forever to be able to duplicate it. We sat in the shop with, dumping buckets of water on it, trying to get it, trying to duplicate it, running it through the car wash, trying to duplicate it, and it wouldn't happen. It was one of those where I had even brought the car home for the weekend, driving it around, kind of running errands to try to see if I could get it to happen. And then finally
I'd
it
just like to
did.
put a pause in that for just a quick second. For anybody that's out there that's listening that's never been a technician, when you drive a car home and it's because of a diagnostic issue like David is describing, you've got the scan tool hooked up all of the time. If you're trying to run your normal life, but also be a mechanic at the same time,
Yeah.
with a scan tool at the same time, it is incredibly stressful, time consuming, and overwhelming all at the same time. Because A, it's not your car. B, it's a business card that you're participating in extra help, as it were, because we don't even typically get compensated in any capacity for being inconvenienced to driving a car home that's not ours. And you're trying to like, okay, if this happens, I've got the scan tool. Okay, if this happens, I have to do this, and this to make sure I get data log, or I have to do this, or I have to do this. It's incredibly time consuming, stressful, and overwhelming. Please, if you have technicians who do this for you, DeSantos, I'm looking directly at you. Make sure people understand how difficult this is, and make sure the techs who are doing it are paid or compensated or something for this effort, because it is way above and beyond. Way above and beyond. Sorry, I needed to put a pin in
Yeah,
that
no,
because
that's
that
fair.
came up
That's fair.
before and I didn't say anything.
Yeah, so I was driving it around on the weekend, and of course, it was like 8 p.m. on Sunday night. It happened. I'm on a busy 4-lane road, funny enough, in front of a local GM dealership. And the car, I stop at a red light, car lights up like a Christmas tree, stalls out. I'm sitting there for 10 minutes trying to get it started, can't get it started. And of course, this was during COVID. So I call roadside assistance to get the car towed back to the dealership. I wasn't allowed to ride in the tow truck because of COVID. Luckily enough, I had to call my brother in law. He came, picked me up, followed the car back to the dealership. But like you said, I had the diagnostic tablet hooked up to it. And when it stalled out, I noticed that the issue was pointing towards the accelerator pedal sensor. So I kind of had an idea of where to look. But again, being Sunday and dealership being closed and not having that many tools at my disposal at home, Monday came around and I started poking around, and long story short, ended up finding a very small amount of water was entering near the windshield, kind of dripping on that driver's side kick panel, and a bunch of wires were corroded and all that. But yeah, it just took a while to kind of duplicate it and figure out where to look, just because the first time it came in, you know how these modern cars are. If one system has an issue, it gives you a whole list of everything's, parking brake, this and that. So it took a bit to kind of figure out what was just set because this was set. And once I had a direction to go in, then it took a little bit to, rip apart a bunch of the wiring underneath the dash, which is my favorite, being a thick boy. It's always fun being, upside down under a dash. But yeah, we found it, kind of fixed the water leak and repaired the harness and all that. But yeah, that was just one of the ones that just popped in my head when you brought that up. But there's been a few where it's you scratch your head, and luckily enough, our foreman is great. He's been at the dealership for probably close to 40-ish years. And he's, we joke around in the shop, and I always say he's a wizard. He's the kind of guy that can walk over if he see like, and he's really good that if he sees somebody kind of like not struggling, but kind of plugging away trying to diagnose something, he'll notice, and then he'll come over and he'll be like, hey, what's going on with this and that, and then he'll kind of give you pointers on like, oh, maybe check this, maybe check that. So he's great to have around.
That's awesome. So a couple of things in there. One, I want to point out that anybody out there that's having electrical issues, one, I feel your pain. I feel your pain in a big way. 2010, 2011, Dodge Grand Caravans, Chrysler Town Countries, random CAN bus failure. It wouldn't start. You'd have the lights and the wipers going, and the horn would be going off when we have CAN bus failures back then. Long story short, end up being in the heat when the driver's D pillar would get really, really warm. A large junction connector would get really, really warm, and the pin tension would change. So you'd get CAN bus open. And obviously when CAN bus goes open and then closed, you have all the codes everywhere, but you have nowhere idea where to look, because literally because it's in the D pillar, it's everything. Everything is gone. It's not just a couple of systems, it's everything. So when you have every code known to God and man in there, you have no idea where to look. Eventually, we found, I don't remember who exactly put their finger on it between myself and about 3 or 4 other technicians who are actively in and out of like several of these vans, but it was pin tension. I feel your pain. But the fault itself was not something directly related to all of the failure. You've got all kinds of failures. You got a failure in an accelerator pedal. But the failure is not actually the accelerator. The failure is not even in the corroded wires. The failure is probably an air pocket during a sealing process of a windshield that has allowed water to get in. So the failure on an accelerator, a failed accelerator pedal or a wiring to accelerator pedal, was because of an air gap in a windshield or something similar. It sounded like it was something similar in that capacity. So if you're smashing your face against a concrete wall trying to diagnose something, understand that there are thousands of us out there doing exactly the same thing, because you know what? When you make 1 million of something, 1% failure is a fairly big number. You get 99 right and 1 wrong on a large scale, like mass production of vehicles happens, you get some really crazy stuff happen. So my grace goes out to you trying to get that stuff done. 2, foreman. I've been saying this since episode 1. I've been saying this my entire life. The most important person in the shop is the shop foreman. A high value leader foreman is going to change the entire outlook on the entire facility, not just service. They change everything, because guess who sales goes to when they need something dealt with? Guess who service goes to when they need something dealt with? Guess who the entire dealership goes to, because they are like dad.
Yeah.
They know how to fix things. They know how to communicate. They know how to be somebody's safe space. They know how to observe the shop around them, so they can see when somebody's doing well. They can see when somebody's not, just by observing. So a high value shop foreman changes the entire dealership. Inversely, the opposite is also true. A poor shop foreman will bring the entire facility down. So this year in 2025, we're going to be spending a lot more time on leadership, a lot more time on development, a lot more time on accountability, really focusing on service managers and shop foremen. So David, thank you very much for bringing that up. It's thank you to your foreman.
Yeah.
But thank you for bringing that up. So this time progressed. We've got almost 17 years. I want to go back a little bit. I want to talk about college a little. There were a couple of very interesting characters teaching. Now, if I'm going to try and say a phrase here, let's see if you can pick out who it is, because I'm not 100% sure you had all the same teachers, but I can fairly much guess they're the same. I'm going to tell you.
Actually, I
Yeah?
don't think we had any of the same teachers.
Why, you went to Ashtonby?
I did, but I did a specific Honda and Acura program. So it wasn't the general program. It was literally 4 8-week terms where we would do, the curriculum.
Hmm.
But anytime there was, so perfect example, automatic transmissions. Honda does their automatic transmissions a little differently than all the other manufacturers. I'm talking like older ones. Now they have 10 speeds and they were using 9-speed ZF transmissions for a while. But the older stuff, they would use, the design was very similar to a manual transmission, but it had ATF feed pipes and that kind of stuff. So perfect example is when we do automatic transmissions, we were taking apart old school Chrysler transmissions because we had to learn the curriculum, but then we would do an extra curriculum of the Honda specific transmissions. Or anytime we were doing engines, we were obviously taking apart Honda
Honda.
engines. All the cars we were working on in the classroom, they were Honda stuff. Um,
Okay.
all of the wiring diagrams and all of the service information that we had at our disposal at school was all Honda stuff. So yeah, it was, even though it was at Ashtonby, the teachers were specific to the Honda program, because I remember walking through the campus and it was like, yeah, like the general stuff is over there, the GM class was over here. We were right next to the Toyota and Lexus class. So there was a few manufacturer specific groups at the college.
There's a GM program, the Chrysler program, the Ford program, obviously, and I remember the Honda Acura program.
Yes, so I did
I think
that
I think it
program.
was just the four of them, right? The because I don't think Toyota is Toyota there. I don't remember if Toyota's there or not.
They might have went after, because they were right next to us, but I do believe it was a somewhat new program.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
yeah,
I'm just trying to.
I started at Ashtonby in, I want to say 2008, because I finished high school and started full time at the dealership in 2006. So it must have
I'm
been like
trying to
oh
think.
07, 08 when I started.
I got my license in 07, and I started. I think it was October of 08. I started at the Chrysler store in Woodbridge. And the apprentices, and more importantly, the co-op. And so the co-op students who became apprentices were doing the CDJR program at Ashtonby, and so the interesting thing is, I think somewhere in there, some of the general program teachers were also doing some of the
Okay.
branded teaching as well, because I'm pretty sure that the transmission teacher that I had Mantis for all 3 levels for transmissions. I think he was also doing one or a couple more of the other non-general classes, whether it was Chrysler. I think he was doing the Chrysler one as well.
Yeah.
Think, if I recall conversations with some of my apprentices back then, they were using the same names. I'm pretty sure Mantis was doing some of the Chrysler stuff, but not Honda.
Yeah,
That's
we
because
had
most of the
Holmes.
transmissions in the general
Yeah.
stuff is Chrysler.
Yeah, we had Mr. Holmes, Mr. Haight, and Mr. Goldmans. There was the 3 of them.
Yeah, no, not the same. Not the
Yeah.
same. Not the probably still characters.
Oh yes.
Probably still characters,
Oh yes.
but not the same characters.
Yeah.
Okay, so memory lane satisfied. Memory lane satisfied.
Yeah.
A lot of things have changed between 2006 and 2025. Your love for vehicles hasn't changed. What would you say is your favorite thing to do now?
I've always really loved doing engine work. I don't know what it is about engines, but I think it's just because there's so much that goes into them, and I love taking everything apart and then putting it back together and starting it up and hearing it run perfectly and that kind of stuff. So luckily enough, as I'm sure a lot of people that are in the industry know, Honda and Acura have quite a big recall right now on connecting rod bearings. So luckily we're doing a lot of those right now, which is my favorite kind of work. So yeah, it's, dropping a whole powertrain unit and then separating the block from the transmission and putting the engine on a stand and, taking the pan off and disconnecting the rods and pulling the crankshaft out. And I'd love doing that kind of stuff.
When was your first one?
So out of this actual,
Not, I don't just mean, sorry, let me be specific. When was
Yeah.
your first engine?
so now we're going back to early 2000, yeah, 2006, 2007, 2008. I was doing a lot of work for friends, again, being a Honda boy, doing a lot of like B series swaps in friends' cars. And, a friend of mine has an Integra that he still owns to this day that we, took the engine out and did a swap because it was a non VTEC and we put a VTEC engine in it. And then we were having issues with that. So we took it apart and he got another block. Then we were taking, pistons, rods, crank out of that block, putting into the bare block that he got and doing all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, that was probably like 2008, 2009, 2010 was when I was doing like my first kind of like real engine work. And yeah, just kind of from there, it's kind of what I always loved the most. I like doing it all. The variety is nice in this industry, doing literally everything.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, engine work for some reason has always been my favorite.
Awesome. I really enjoy doing engines too, but I think the variety I really enjoy. I think I like engines not so much because the taking apart, putting it back together, hearing it run, although that is very, very satisfying. I think for me it was being super focused on one thing for a long period of time. My only focus. Like when you're doing engines, you're not doing other jobs, right? You're really not doing other jobs at all. You're not pulling in something beside you to have an apprentice put up in the air to check it out and whatever. You haven't got a diagnostic in the flat bay beside you trying to figure out what's wrong with this super complicated issue, like having, the lights come on and everything shut off, like you were describing earlier. You're not doing any of that. Because when you're doing engines,
Yeah, you're
you
very
have hundreds and hundreds of nuts and bolts and processes, and everything has to be done a certain way to make sure A, you've done it properly, and B, so that it actually runs when you're done. It requires all of your mental energy to do properly. And even if you've done them like dozens and dozens and dozens of times, it still requires a lot of mental energy to stay focused and in the moment because it takes one missed bolt torque, one to throw it into the garbage when you're done. Like it takes one.
literally, yeah.
So that I think to me was the thing. It's like it's stressful. It's a lot of effort. I think I like that about it. But I do like you said, I like the variable in the day. You could be doing brakes on something in the morning. You could be doing an electrical repair on something else in the afternoon, and then you could be doing an oil change at the end of the day, right? It's you have to understand that there's a variable in a day and understand and I like saying it. It's the boring stuff. Do you find? And hey, let me ask the question instead of make the statement. Do you find it's the boring stuff that makes you the most money?
Yes, yes. It's smashing out the brakes and doing that kind of the services where it's, dump and fill and replace these filters and do that. Like, that's what makes you I don't want to say easy money, but
It makes us the most money. You have to get good at the stuff that's boring, and you have to get good at understanding. Okay, I'm probably going to do another 10,000 oil changes in my life, and I'm going to have to be okay with doing that because it's not an apprentice job. It's not a lube tech job. It's a mechanic job.
yeah, it's part of the job. Yeah.
It's part of the job. I'm probably going to do another 10,000 brake jobs in my life. It's super boring. But you know how you make things that are super boring like that fun? You start tracking the data. So once I started really tucking into flat rate, I started documenting everything. And one of the things that I found over my career is that it's the technicians who do the most documenting for themselves are the ones that are making the most money. Because they're aware, they observe, they understand how to grow because, okay, I did this way last time and I did it this way. So I'm going to try it slightly different this time and I'm going to see what the result is at the end. Did I make money on it? Did I make money on it, but did I make as much or did I make less than I did the last time? Okay, I made a little bit less. Okay, so I can't do it that way. Let's throw that way in the garbage. Those documentation pieces turn something that's boring into something that's challenging because now it's you against you. You're looking at beating the clock while still maintaining a level of quality and efficacy that provides you with satisfaction. And more importantly, you make the car safe, right? And the more you can do that, more successful you can do that, the more money you're going to make. So a little tidbit for today. So to that point, over your career, this is the most important question that I'm going to ask today is what's your one piece of advice for a technician to be happier, healthier, more productive tomorrow?
So like I mentioned earlier, I've listened to almost every episode you put out. I've kind of been thinking about this for a while, and every once in a while I'll hear somebody else give that piece of advice, and it's like, I got to come up with a different one. So this one is kind of similar to one we've heard before, but I'm going to kind of grow on it a little bit. And it's something that I kind of learned a few years ago, um, and it's learn how to say no to money. Because, work life balance is huge. I was guilty of not being very good at it. I used to be the guy that would, especially in my apprentice days and early on, I'd be the guy that, during tire season when we were swamped, I'd be going in at 7 a.m. and leaving at 7 p.m. and then leaving there to go work on my buddy's car to help him, put this part on or do an engine swap and that kind of stuff and not get home till, who knows, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning to be up at 7 again the next day and do it over because you need to take care of yourself first before you can take care of other people, whether it be your family at home, the customers, that kind of stuff. I still struggle with it to, take the time to take care of myself first. I've been burned by it a few times, and those are usually the things that kind of like wake you up to be like, okay, like I need to kind of focus on myself a little bit so that way I can be here for, my wife, my kids, my managers, customers. So yeah, learn how to say no to money. Work-life balance is huge because, take care of yourself before you can take care of others.
Awesome.
It's kind of like
Awesome.
three of them mashed in there, but
I like it because it does provide context. The challenge I have in there is between the age of 18 and 25. I think the answer is not necessarily say no to money, but say no to things that aren't of value.
that's probably the better
To
way to put
me,
it. Yeah.
not necessarily money. I think there is an aspect that you need to be very mindful of saying no to money, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. Because if you're doing things just for money, not good. But I think if something is not providing value to you, I think you need to be selfish to a certain degree. Because as the phrase is, if you're not learning, you should be earning. If you're not earning, you should be learning. And if you're not doing either, you should be out of there. Um, 18 to 25, learn as much as humanly possible. And whilst you might have made money during that 18 to 25, working 7 to 7 and then going to your buddy's shop and working from like 8 till midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, you probably made some money doing that. You absolutely did. But I think the thing that you might have learned then that you didn't think about then, or even now perhaps, is that you tripled how much you were learning, right? If you're doing that 7 days a week and you're working 12 to 16 hours a day and you're doing things that you've never done before and you're doing all kinds of things that you've never done before, those skill sets and learning are as valuable as the ambition and drive itself. So I wholeheartedly agree that work-life balance is a thing, but work-life balance changes as we age. Like as I'm 41, my work-life balance is completely out the door. Like completely out the door between having a full-time gig and working for Fixed Ops Marketing has been transformative to what I can do with my family. But between full-time gig to support, having all of the obligations for family, which I get to do, like my son is in 7 things in 6 days, and all but one is a 45-minute drive or more each direction. So when we go to his soccer Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday, there's about 20 hours that I physically cannot do anything else. I can't even work. A, because I'm driving, and B, because of cell reception, everywhere we go where his soccer pitch is, there is no cell reception.
Yeah.
So I can't access anything at all. So unless I have it already pre-saved on my phone or on my laptop, I can't do any work. And even then, I don't really want to do work while he's playing a game or playing soccer or practicing soccer because I want to be involved in his life. So that's out the door. So I'm working crazy amounts. I'm providing for my family in crazy amounts of way. So I like a 5-hour sleep is a good night for me. But when I was 25, the same was true as about 5 hours of sleep because like you, I was working 7 to 7 and then going to my buddy's shop and we were working until, 11, 12 at night, fixing customer cars, doing this, learning because his dad would teach me all kinds of crazy stuff. Henry is awesome, but there are seasons. I'm fairly confident that in my next 2 to 3 years, I'm not going to be working 16-hour days every day. There's just no way. But that's my balance. Not everybody's like that. Your personal work-life balance is super important. So doing the things that provide value to you first, if you can also give as much as humanly possible back as value for the opportunities, like we said at the very beginning, you are grateful for the opportunity. I'm grateful for the opportunities to do what I do So I try to provide as much value back as humanly possible. So I appreciate that very much. So David, so one of the cool things that we've been doing successively here now, I don't know how many I've done in a row, but I have a question for you from the previous guest. He has no
Okay.
idea who the next guest was. So it's an interesting question for you here. Because we're kind of talking about that very thing. So Robert Migliaccio was the last guest. That's the episode that's going to go out before yours. So his question to you is, if you could go back and tell your 17-year-old self something, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a good one. I know it sounds kind of like cliche, but like kind of just enjoy the ride and don't rush it, you know? Not that I don't feel that I did rush it, but kind of just enjoy the process of kind of, when you're, especially being 17 was pretty much like right as I was transitioning from, the co-op high school thing going into the dealership life. Just yeah, enjoy the process, enjoy understand that at that point in my life, I didn't know shit.
Mm-hmm.
And enjoy the learning and that kind of stuff. Maybe spend more time with kind of spread around the shop and kind of see how different people do different things and kind of just use that to piece together my own way of doing things as opposed to kind of just working with one person, kind of doing it the way they do it and kind of evolving into your own way. But yeah, mostly just kind of like enjoy the ride. Don't be rushed of like, oh, I can't wait till I'm done school and I can't wait till I'm licensed and I can't wait till this and that. Just kind of enjoy the process and you'll get there eventually.
Awesome. Awesome. So to that point, what's your question for the next guest?
Probably be something along the lines of like what trying to think of how to word this, but kind of along the lines of like what is your way of kind of that finding that work-life balance of kind of like what you said, where like the value of your family life and that kind of stuff and providing value for your clients, whether it be, a fixed ops or a tech or parts or sales or whatever. But yeah, what do they do to kind of find that happy balance? Do they just unplug completely when they leave work and work is work and home is home, or do they have that kind of where they slowly kind of cross over but not too much, or just kind of what do they do like that? Because I'd be
Gotcha.
I'd be
How do
curious.
they find their own work-life balance?
Yeah,
Gotcha. I like it. I like it. Should be interesting. I have no idea what's next. Like, I have no idea what the guest is next because it's constantly evolving for the most
yeah.
part. It changes. Like between us, like it constantly changes. So I appreciate that. So David, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joshua. It was a pleasure. Like I said before too, I'm a fan of the pod. I've been listening to pretty much all of them. I got one more to catch up on, and I'm looking forward to hearing the next few. Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
You're most welcome, and thank you for listening, folks. I think that's the end of another episode today. I really hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Enjoyed David's story. I think there's a lot of really awesome insights in there. I really hope you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. It really helps us grow the show. We're knocking on 200,000 views and we're knocking on 300 subscribers on the show. I really appreciate all that, as long as all those other folks on LinkedIn, on TikTok that are following along on the shorts and so on and so forth there. I really appreciate all of you. And to end the show, as we always do, with a quote, I think this one fits in quite nicely with David's story. When your work speaks for itself, don't interrupt. Henry Kaiser. Folks, remember, negative pushes, positive pulls, and always clean your toys before you put them away.